I first started teaching at a university, I wondered if I knew enough. I never finished college, so I was a little insecure. And I realized that I don't know a lot of things, but I know a couple of things really well. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, a couple of things I know really well. One of them is secrets, and the other is engines. So, I grew up in Iowa, in a quintessential house with a quintessential Midwestern basement, full of my mother's good intentions, which means she had put indoor-outdoor carpeting down there and built-in desks that we were supposed to do our homework at. Like all good intentions, this one failed because the basement started to flood, and every spring that carpet got worse and more dank, and the basement filled up with families of mice and garter snakes. So suffice to say, none of us ever wanted to go down there. I have an older brother who's 4 years older than me, and when I was 8, he coerced me into going down into the basement with him. And he had me lay down on a table and lift my nightgown up over my hips. And he proceeded to touch me quite thoroughly, only not with his hands. He used a pencil. He used the eraser end of a pencil, as if he wanted to erase me down there. Now, this story is not a secret. I have told this story 100 times. I wrote it into my first novel. The secret is not the insult, but the message I received as a result of the insult, which is that what I wanted didn't matter. What mattered was what my brother wanted. So to quote a storyteller who's dear to Provincetown, Grace Paley, as often happens in stories, it was many years later. This time, it's 1978, it's May, I'm on the verge of being 18, and I'm driving with my friend Jane to a town called Salem, Iowa. Anybody ever been there? Didn't think so. It's tiny. It's in the middle of a cornfield, and we're going on a Sunday to go to the Gospel Day of a bluegrass festival that's happening there. Now, gospel in Iowa in a cornfield is nothing like you think of as gospel. It's twangy. It's full of banjos and guitars and really, really tight, precise harmonies. And because it was 1978 and because I was on the verge of turning 18, we thought that this was a prime moment to take a hit of LSD. We timed the LSD to hit right as we were pulling into the cornfield to go to the Gospel Day and the Bluegrass Festival. And it was at the precise moment when the sky is going from that amazing Iowa blue to something kind of more swirly and paisley. And we get out of the car and we lay down our blanket and we sit down, and the music is just starting to crescendo and wend its way up to God. And I look over at my friend Jane. Now, she is the quintessential Midwestern beauty. She's got blonde, curly hair and giant brown eyes and smooth skin and freckles, and she's wearing a little spaghetti strap sundress, and I happen to glance over at her, and I look down her dress, and I realize she's not wearing a bra, and I see her breasts, and I am overcome with a desire to kiss Jane. And I am so convinced that I'm actually going to do it, that I have to get up and walk the perimeter of the Bluegrass Festival to talk myself down. And when I think I'm ready, I go back to the blanket and I sit down with Jane, and I'm overcome again. It's like a door is opening in my chest, and I think, I'm really going to do it. This big Jewish girl in the middle, yes, there are Jews in Iowa, this big Jewish girl in the middle of the Christian Gospel Festival on Sunday in Salem, Iowa, is going to lay the biggest, most passionate kiss on this blonde girl the world has ever seen. And I think, I got to get up. So I spend the entire Bluegrass Festival getting up and walking around and talking myself down and going back to the blanket until, by some miracle, the drugs start to wear off, the sun starts to go down, and it's time to go home. And I get in the car with Jane, and I forget all about my desire to kiss her. Now, this story is also not a secret. I wrote about it in my second book. God bless her, I used her last name too. I didn't know if I was supposed to, but I did. That is a story about an engine. The engine is the thing that allowed me to see my desire and then pulled me back from it until it was safe enough for me to know that it was okay to come out. So when I went to college in Olympia, Washington, and I met the lesbians who lived next door, in that minute I knew. I remembered that I had wanted to kiss that girl, and I knew immediately that I was gay. So what do when you figure out that you're gay? You call your liberal parents. And you say to them, by the way, I'm gay. And they say, like many liberal parents, we knew. It turns out that for a lot of us, people just know, right? It's not a surprise to anybody. The people in the grocery store know, the people in your church know, the people in your school know. So it makes me think, well, why didn't anybody say anything, right? They don't say anything a lot because they don't want to hear you talk about it. It's okay that you are it, but you're not supposed to say it. You're not supposed to do it, and you're certainly not supposed to make other people know about it, which meant to me that we weren't supposed to have our desire, right? We weren't supposed to want what we wanted. And I know that to want something is to be human. So the message that I received was, you're not allowed to exist as a human in the world. To quote the lovely Gardner poet of Provincetown, who's on your t-shirts, what makes the engine go? Desire, desire, desire. The engine propels us into our lives no matter what. So, it's 1981. I'm living in Olympia, Washington. I'm writing crazy poems in art studios. I'm finally actually kissing girls. And let me tell you, for anybody who's ever kissed a girl, it's as good as you think it's going to be. And I'm pretty much happier than I ever remember being in my life. And then I get invited to go to a poetry reading, and it's by a poet named Olga Brumas, who's a Greek-born poet. And listening to her, I feel that same sensation of a door opening in my chest that I felt when I wanted to kiss that girl. And I know that what I'm hearing is the voice of the engine. The music that she's speaking is like Kepler's music of the spheres, only my ear is tuned to the frequency that she's hearing. And even though I have no idea what she's writing about, I know that what I'm hearing is something akin to me. So I find out that she's starting a school for women writers, and it's a place called Provincetown, and have I ever heard of it, and do I want to go there? And I say, no, but yes. So, having never been further east than Chicago in my life, I get a car, and I find my way to Provincetown. And I pull into Provincetown on Labor Day of 1982. And I'm 21, and I have never seen this many people in one place in my life. For those of you who have been to Provincetown in August or September, you know what I'm talking about. You can't get a car through there. And before I know it, I'm on the west end of town, because the other thing we don't have in the Midwest is traffic rotaries. And I'm turned around the traffic rotary and shot out the other end of town back on the highway before I know what I'm doing. And I think, how can I live? I can't even figure out how to get into the town. How can I live here? But I think that engine is moving me, and I remember that voice, and I think I'm going to do it. So I figure out how to get back on 6A, and I get myself a cheap motel room on Beach Point, and I go to sleep, and I wake up, and I think, fortified for the town. I drive back into town, and lo and behold, it has gone from a zoo to a ghost town overnight. There's nobody on the street. And I think, this is where my plans have stopped, right? I have no idea where anybody is. So there's a school. Where's the school? They don't have a building. Where are these people? What do? Well, I do what any self-respecting lesbian did in Provincetown in 1982 to find out anything? I went to Women Crafts. Anybody know Women Crafts? It's still there. It is such a venerable institution. I don't know if they still have their bulletin board. But pre-cell phones and pre-computer, this was the place to get a message to somebody. So I go into Women Craft and I write a note that says something like, "Freehand women, where are you?" And God bless them, within a couple hours, somebody had gone in and seen my note, and that was it. I was there. I started to write, and I loved being there. I never went back to college. I thought I'd be in Provincetown for 7 months. Never went back. That was 1982, so you can imagine. But lest we think that the secret has been knocked out of the park yet, it hasn't. Because the more desire you allow yourself to feel, it turns out, the more shame comes up to bite you in the ass. So I could kiss a girl by then, but I couldn't really love one. And I could write a poem, but the meanings of these poems were so embedded that even I couldn't figure out what I was talking about. But it turns out that the more you move yourself ahead, the more evidence you have of your ability to actually be moved. And so the engine kept moving me forward. I fell in love, I published a book, I fell out of love, I published another book, and then in the year 2000 I met my girlfriend, who's still my girlfriend. She's fabulous, she's sitting over here. Find out for yourself how fabulous she is when I'm done talking. We find these amazing places to live on the water, and we move into the water, and we're writing and we're making things, and I am happier than I ever remember being in my life. And then she goes to visit her mother, and she calls me and she says, "My mother's failing and she has to come and live with us." And I think, okay. It's the first time in my life I remember thinking actively, I choose this. Not this is something being chosen for me that I have to live through, but this is actually something I choose. I want to do this. And as often happens in these stories, the three of us fall in love. And so there we are living on the water. But desire, just getting started. Because as you allow yourself to want things, you start to want bigger. And the thing I wanted now was a child. I had wanted a baby since I could remember. My sister, who's straight, was the butch one. She played with trucks and beat up boys. I babysat and played with dolls, go figure. I always wanted a baby, but I never had confidence in my ability to be able to take it on. It felt too big. It felt like too much. I thought I would fail at it. I thought I wouldn't be good enough. But now it was what I wanted. But I thought, I'm 40. My body is really not going to go there. As soon as I would talk myself out of wanting a child, I'd take a walk on the beach, I'd look down, I'd find an egg. It was crazy. I'd pick the egg up, took it home, I put it on a shelf. This happened several times. I'd look down, oh, robin's egg, I'd bring it home, put it on the shelf. Finally got the message that this was something I really was compelled to do. Now, we already had mom with Alzheimer's at home. It seemed like a big leap, but I was determined that we were going to do it. And so I said to Molly, let's just do the paperwork. Let's just fill out the forms. We don't actually have to have a baby, but it's like we could put it in the vault, right? So we have the paperwork done. Well, you know, somebody says, I'm just going to go to law school because I'm interested in the law. They buy a briefcase, it's all over, they're a lawyer. But I was tricking myself into allowing myself to want the thing that I really wanted. So we fill out the forms. We get a social worker, you meet with the social worker a bunch of times, you go answer a bunch of personal questions, you drive home with your girlfriend in absolutely stunned silence, thinking, what are we doing? But here we are. The engine is moving us forward, moving us forward. So we come down, we have one more meeting with the social worker before we get our papers. The social worker lives in this town outside of Boston called Mattapoisett, and we happen to be that night in Boston because Molly's mom has fallen and broken her ankle. And she is in the hospital. And the medication that she's on to help her with the pain in the hospital only serves to exacerbate her confusion. And Molly says to me, I don't think we can leave her. And I say, we're going to the goddamn meeting. I am not a person who's been that forceful about things in my life, but I said, we're going to the meeting. And not only was her mother in the hospital, it was snowing. And it was snowing really hard. And I said, we're getting in the car, and we're going to let the nurses take care of your mother, and we're going to the meeting. So we get in the car, we drive through the snowstorm. We get the last thing done, boom, we have January. Paperwork is done in February, we're set. What happens, I think, when you start moving yourself forward toward what you really want, toward your heart's desire, is the engine starts to speed up. So I'm thinking I'm going to call some random adoption agency, and I get a call in February from a friend of ours in Provincetown. She and her husband have been fostering this little girl, and they've decided that they're going to adopt her, and the birth mother is pregnant again. And by the way, would we consider taking that baby? Well, she had been born addicted to drugs. We had a sick mother. Were we going to risk having another sick baby? I don't know. In May, our friends were in a terrible car accident, and my friend's husband was killed, and she was injured quite badly, and their now child has been harmed. And we say, okay, whatever, we're just going to take the baby. Whatever happens, we'll save that child from more loss. We're just going to take the baby. What we don't know is 3 days later, I get a call on my cell phone. Come and get the baby. The baby's been born. I'm like, I can't get a baby. Like 3 days, I don't have a crib. My girlfriend's out of town. What do? They say, you don't understand. When social services calls you and says, come and get the baby, it means you have to come and get the baby. So we went, we got the baby. The social workers hand me the baby. They are weeping. They say, we're just telling this boy this is the happiest day of his life. Just add water. Instant mommy. Drive home, get a call 6 months later. Birth mother's pregnant again. You have the one who's closest in age. Would you take the baby? I'm like, what? Who says no? Would I take them? Of course, you get him, we'll take the baby. So a year to the day, we brought our first child home. We get a call from the social worker. We're having a party to celebrate his coming home. We get a call from the social worker. She says, we found the baby. Come and get the baby. A year to the day. There was Jonah. They're 9 and 10 now. They're fine. They're home somewhere doing something. In the meantime, my relationship with my older brother has gotten increasingly more difficult. Our parents have gotten sick. There's a lot of family negotiating that has to happen, and I can't talk to him at all. So I stopped talking to him, and I do what I often do when I can't figure something out. I decide I'm going to write a book about it. So I make up this story in which the protagonist, who is my brother, falls mysteriously ill, and all of the members of his family are coming to his bedside to try and work out their relationship with him. And I'm smart enough at this point to know that all of the people, even though they resemble my family, are actually me. But I'm completely unprepared when I get the phone call that tells me that the story has actually come true. That my brother has fallen gravely ill with metastatic colon cancer. His liver is failing. And my mother is describing on the phone to me scenarios that I have just that day written into my novel. And I do what any good novelist does in that moment. I stop writing and I get on a plane. And I go to Iowa. And I walk into my brother's hospital room, and he looks at me and he says, there's my angel. He says, I love you. I'm sorry. And that's it. It's done. And I take my place next to him, next to his bed, and I rub his hands. Frankincense is his scent of choice. And his liver is failing, and his fucking engine has sped up and is overheating. His liver is failing, so he's hot. And I move the fan around as he moves around in the bed. And I do that for a couple of weeks. And then I have to go home, and I have to check on the kids, and I have to make sure everybody's okay. And I get home, I have this crazy trip back, and I'm sitting in our living room talking to Molly, and the kids are out on the beach, and I get a call from my sister, and she says, he's dying. And she puts the phone to his ear. And I say to him, I'm here, I'm taking you to the beach. And I walk outside, and I hold the phone up, and he hears the water, and he dies. Provincetown is shaped like a pocket, and we who live there are the dross that we pick up from the sea, right? Everybody in Provincetown, you pick up rocks, and they look like rocks to your cousin, but to you, they look like that bird that just flew by your window. Everyone in Provincetown is like that. We're those rocks that you pick up off the sea. And the sea, like your engine, is a perpetual motion machine. So I'm in this town that I've loved for more than 30 years, so of course it becomes clear that the next thing we need to do is move. Can't find a house here, the kids are getting big, you know, the thing with the schools, the whole thing. So we find a house in Brewster, which is about 35 minutes up the road. And now we've got this amazing old house in this big yard, and in the meantime I've lost my teaching job, but I figure, okay, well now I'm free and I can finally finish that book. And the kids go to this bigger school, and it's fantastic because the bus stops at our mailbox at 7:30 in the morning and picks them up and takes them away, and I never see them again for the rest of the afternoon. And Molly's got this job where she leaves, and I'm alone by myself for several hours for the first time 10 years. And I think, now I'm going to write. And then something happens to me that I completely didn't expect, which is that I fall into a terrible depression. Because the engine ultimately is going to collide with that secret, and something is going to fall apart. So when a caterpillar goes through metamorphosis, it dissolves entirely to something called its imaginal discs. And these are the cells that contain all of the information of a butterfly. But it can only become the butterfly if it completely dissolves. So you see the conundrum of that caterpillar. The emergent self is protected by the engine. But it turns out that the emergent self is also the engine. Gay people have brought many, many things into this world. Everything from the divine poet Elizabeth Bishop to Liberace. Broad spectrum of gifts. But I can tell you that if we've brought you anything, what we've brought you is the understanding that you have to come out over and over and over again. That we practice coming out. And that, I would say, is our gift to you, for which you're entirely welcome.